Canon Wars, Volume 3. Beowulf's in the canon. Should it always be taught? Does everybody need to read Beowulf? What value can we get from a work that was written around 800 AD? I don't know. What if we're reading a brand new translation that just came out in 2020? We're going to get into like real specific things today. We're going to talk about the poet's toolkit. We're going to talk about subject and theme in Beowulf. So I guess I'll just define these terms and we'll go from there. Register, level of formality. So this is the poet's toolkit because poets play with all these things. There's a lot of different things that they can play with respect to language. Poetry is language at its most playful, remember? And poetry is a form of art where the medium is you, your body, your voice, and all the things that you need to make your voice. What you need, I don't know, vocal cords, lungs, I don't know. So poets use things like register, tone, alliteration. They use enjambment, caesura, punctuation, and diction. Those are like a sculptor's chisel, big chisel, little chisel, sometimes a big hammer to make something. And we think that what they're making is valuable. So it's worth figuring out how it is they make it. Three concepts that I'm going to talk about today are related and confusing. I'll try to untangle the confusion a little bit, but that's just kind of how it goes. Like I've said this many times before, this is not calculus. It's as complex as calculus, but it's not as neatly ordered as calculus can be, or other mathematics, or astrophysics, or whatever, you know. Diction, tone, and register, they all have to do with how something feels, and sometimes they're confused. Diction and tone is confused a lot. So I'll start with register. Register is the level of formality. But as I said, these things play with these things. Bro, tell me we still know how to speak of kings. In the old days, everyone knew what men were. So this first word here, bro, is register. And level of formality, and it works on a continuum. You've got like up here, extreme, and it's like high-low, which is a hierarchy, which is problematic, because maybe it says one type of language is better than another, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but we certainly act that way. So up here would be like, this is a Supreme Court opinion. Extremely formal. You never start out a Supreme Court opinion with, bro. But you would talk to your best friend at a football game and say, bro, you're in my seat. So generally we have formal and we have informal. And there's quite a bit in between. And one of the things that Headley does in this translation, probably more so than any other translation, is play with register. So it's not like just because the word bro is the first line that there's not also passages or moments where the register is quite formal. We can certainly find those as we read. But the movement between, what does it do? What does it do to the reader? That's always the question. What does it do to the reader? It draws the reader in, creates tension, surprise, shock. There's something shocking. There's a shocking level of informality. What's the most informal language? I don't know, maybe curse words, which she uses for effect. It's part of her plan for taking the reader on a journey into what she believes is is not a sophisticated environment. It is kind of like a locker room. So that's register, level of formality. A formal register, informal register. So one thing you could do with your analyzing this is notice how she shifts in register at different times to have an effect on the reader. Tone is a little bit easier to understand. Not amazingly easy to understand. Tone is basically the attitude. So think about your own life and how you talk in different situations and how you convey attitude through the tone of your voice, through the sound of your voice. What does it sound like? Even a simple word like hi can be communicated with a lot of different tones. Hi. 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 Do you see how those were three distinct meanings that came from the same word? And so when you're reading poetry, one of your chief objectives is to ask yourself this question. What should your voice sound like? What should my voice sound like as I am reading? How does it sound? Sarcastic, sincere, sad. Sad's a tone. Confused, angry, aggressive. This is kind of aggressive. So tone is the attitude about the subject's raise. And what does it sound like? Based on the words, what should your voice sound like reading it? Then something specific. So these are what the tone is in any given piece of writing is kind of like, it's something that you could write several paragraphs about because it's an active interpretation. You are interpreting the tone. And you have to have some evidence to back up your interpretation, and you have to think carefully about context and diction, and a lot of times syntax. So tone is kind of complicated. Alliteration is pretty simple. Alliteration is the same sound at the beginning of nearby words. Now, alliteration can have a relationship to tone. Let me give you an example. And I'm going to use some words you maybe never heard before. Maybe you have. Maybe you've heard them but never used them quite this way. Right here, we have some alliteration. Their first father is alliteration because alliteration is the same sound at the beginning of nearby words. Their first father was a foundling. So that's some alliteration on the F. So what does the F sound like? What does it feel like to say F? It's kind of quiet. It's kind of chill. Sild siffing. This is more alliteration. And sild siffing, when that S sound, it feels a certain way, Sild siffing seems, gentle. But then this contrast. So if this sounds gentle, he spent his youth fists up, browbeating every bar stool brother, bonfiring his enemies. Those B's are kind of explosive. And so if we were just talking about this one line, browbeating every bar stool brother, bonfiring his enemies, we can talk about diction, because diction is what words were chosen. Diction is diction is synonymous with word choice. And this is so complicated to wrap your head around. I think a lot of people latch on to, diction, it's easy to understand. It just means word choice. So the diction in this sentence is that he uses the word later, and then the next diction is God, and then the next diction is sent, and then the next diction choice was sild. Because, see, that's word choice. And the poet, the translator, chose all of those words, so that's the diction. The diction is God sent his No, that's not how it works at all. Diction is a very specific way to define the type of words that are used. And so, browbeating, barstool brother, bonfiring, all of those words are cacophonous. They're cacophonous. They sound like, they sound kind of like, I don't know, I'm going to make it sound. They sound kind of like this. They sound like, they're like, they're not chill. They're loud. They're jumbled together. Browbeating every barstool brother, bonfiring his enemies. Cacophonous diction. Well, what does that do to tone? What's the attitude if it's cacophonous? What's the attitude? What is the author's, the translator's attitude towards this Sild Sifing? Browbeating every barstool brother, bonfiring his enemies. Those are the kind of things that you think about when you're doing this work. Contrasted to different alliteration down here. So this is when he's young, right? This is him. This is his origin story right here. This is his funeral. The war band flew a golden flag over their main man. The salt sea saluted him. Salt sea saluted him. See how different that sounds of barstool brother? Salt sea saluted him. This is called euphonious diction because it's like smooth. It's easy. It's like music. This is like music that's like, knocking over garbage cans. Cacophonous. Euphonious sounds nice, sounds pleasant, sounds easy on the ear. And what effect does that have? And these are just two different types of diction. That's where I like to start with diction. Because it's just sets of categories that you apply to different words. Now, some people also talk of informal diction and formal diction, which is where the confusion comes to register. Tone, can a tone be formal or informal? Can my attitude towards something be formal or informal? Yes. So these are all related. Alliteration. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about two terms, enjambment and caesura, which we have examples of. My good example of caesura is a little bit deeper in the poem, but I want to talk about enjambment is easy. Enjambment is it's when a line has no punctuation at the end. And so when you read it, the most important thing when you read it is that you go right, you don't stop. There's no break here. Only stories now. Only stories now. And we look at poetry so deeply that we would say only. Only is kind of like running downhill, When you say only, the emphasis on only, the beat is right here, right? Stressed or unstressed syllables is a thing in poetry. Only. You don't say only. Only. And when you have a stressed syllable and then an unstressed syllable, it starts to move forward. It starts to move forward quickly. But then there's this line break right here. So you have to hurry up and get over here. Only stories now. That's how you're supposed to read that. That is an enjambed line or a use of enjambment. Another enjambment line. This is a period, the terminal punctuation. So, just to get a little bit ahead of myself, I don't know, in your notes, put like a huge box around this, and then maybe get another color, and put another box around it, in that color. And then, if you have a highlighter that's close by, maybe use the highlighter and put a little box around it with the highlighter, and then maybe get another color highlighter and actually highlight it, which I won't do because I don't have one handy. But punctuation is really, really important. Punctuation always matters. Punctuation is red. Punctuation is part of tone. Moving forward. Punctuation Enjambment. Oh, I was going to show you Sashira. Sashira is when you have a line that has a break in it. So let's go here, much deeper in this agon, and read this line. And we'll have to start back a little bit. Wow, there's a caesura right there. This whole thing. And so here we have femininity. This is quite a masculine poem. Nonetheless, femininity is there. This is Wilthel, Hrothgar's queen. So where should I start reading? Let's see if I can find a period. She went round. She went round, a helming hostess, treading with purpose, rings shining, beer-sounding soldiers, old and young, both of her own house and the sea slayers, goblet held to her breast. Hashtag blessed. So that's funny because it's a mixture of, it's an injection of a very, very contemporary phrase into a very, very old poem. So that makes it interesting. But it's a double Sashira. That is, a caesura is when you stop in the middle of a line. So you're cruising along, and there's a period in the middle of a line. You stop. There's a pause. There's another pause right there because we also pause at colons. So, and if you read all of this, like the effect on the reader is she's so busy. She's so busy seeing to everyone's needs, taking care of everything, looking here, she's going over there, she's making sure everybody gets everything they need. Hashtag blessed. And so it almost makes this ironic, maybe ironic. That's kind of how irony works, is you go, did she really mean that she's blessed? Or is that hashtag blessed in 2020? Does hashtag blessed really even mean hashtag blessed? So it's a good passage. Caesura, break in the middle. You'll see it all the time. Anytime there's a period, a lot of times a colon, there's one right there, there's one right there, and all of these impact the meaning. Of course they do. So now I've talked about all these things. I've talked about register, tone, alliteration, enjambment, caesura, punctuation, diction. Now you're learning these things, coming to know these things. Last thing I want to talk about, subjects and themes, because these things are all fine. This is the poet's toolkit, but the poet's toolkit, the poet did not write the poem so that they could exercise the toolkit. That'd be like the sculptor who made the great sculpture, saying, "Well, I just wanted to see what my hammer could do." Maybe, but probably they had something bigger in mind, something of value. So, subjects. We have subjects and themes. Subjects and themes. This poem has got all kinds of subjects. You just have to say, what's in the poem? What's it about? What happens? What is it? What is it? There's a monster. There's murder. There's a swamp and a castle. So, listing the subjects is good. It's a nice thing to do. But more important is exploring, examining, interpreting the theme. The theme is subject. What's it about? Theme. What is the poet saying about what it's about? So, for example, if we look just on this first page, with blue, I underline things that have to do with heredity and lineage. First father, bootstrapped his way into a kingdom. God sealed a son. We all know a boy can't daddy until his daddy's dead. A smart son gives gifts to his father's friends. That father they'd followed. Beowulf rolled into righteous rule, daddying for decades after his own daddy died, smothering his father's story with his own. Smothering his father's story with his own. So, knowing that all of these different aspects of lineage and heredity are here, What is the poet saying about lineage and heredity? And that's some hard work, because that might involve tone, that might involve register, that might involve a lot of different things. What is he saying? And what is she saying? Bootstrapped his way into a kingdom. Bootstrapped his way. He took what was his. He built something. So heredity is really about building for the future. What about a boy can't daddy until his daddy's dead? You have to wait for your place. All those things are possible themes.